Imagine discovering your spouse's affair, not through suspicion, not through a message, but through thousands of hours of recordings. Every word, every whisper, captured without them knowing. Imagine breaking bit by bit until your entire world collapses into one impossible conclusion. If I can't have him, no one can. In April 2021, in the quiet, wealthy suburb of Winford Glen, a woman in a black wig stepped off a train with a handgun hidden in her bag. She walked with chilling calm toward the home of her husband's mistress. She let herself inside. She waited. And minutes after Savannah Cole returned from work, 2 lives ended on the kitchen floor. The man at the center of it all arrived moments later, only to find the blood, the bodies, and the truth that would haunt him for the rest of his life. This is the story of a wife's obsession, a husband's betrayal, a mistress's final evening, and a murder-suicide that shocked an entire community. Welcome to Crime Hall. Be sure to subscribe for more chilling tales. The night everything collapsed. At 7:46 p.m., on a cool spring evening in the quiet town of Riverstone Hill, Pennsylvania, 2 women lay dead on a polished marble kitchen floor, side by side, as if their final moments had been choreographed by fate. Their blood still warm, the room still echoing with gunfire that no one had heard, a tragedy no one imagined possible, and the man who loved them, both of them, was driving straight toward the nightmare he created without knowing what waited for him behind the blue front door on Meadowlark Drive. Hours later, when police pressed him, "Did you shoot these women?" he answered with a hollow, trembling voice, They were already shot." That was the moment his entire world imploded. Everything he built, everything he ran from, every lie he told, every truth he hid, gone. And the story of how he arrived at that moment begins long before that night. In the summer of 1992, when the air shimmered above the asphalt, and teenagers drifted through fast food jobs like windblown leaves, Elias Wren first saw her. He was 19, she was 17, and she was standing behind the counter of a run-down burger barn on Maple Road, in a uniform 2 sizes too big, and an attitude larger than life. Her name was Alyssa Hartman. She had a laugh that cracked open whatever room she entered, a wild streak in her eyes, as if she belonged anywhere except behind that greasy counter. Elias, quiet and painfully shy, used to drive by the burger barn 3 times a week just to buy a soda he didn't want, only to leave without ever saying a real word to her. For years afterward, the regret sat in his chest like a stone. He would later tell detectives, "I spent my whole youth wanting her, terrified of her, fascinated by her." Their paths drifted apart until, 4 years later, fate nudged them back together. It was at a mutual friend's bonfire party in 1996. Elias saw her across the flames, older now, still glowing with the same rebellious spirit. That night, he finally found the courage he lacked as a teenager. He said hello. She laughed and said she remembered him as the guy who tipped too much for a soda. They began dating. Alyssa was everything Elias wasn't. Bold, reckless, impulsive, ready to love with her whole chest. He was calm, reserved, a listener. Their chemistry was electric and volatile. In 2001, they married. Elias was 26. Alyssa was 24. They built a small marketing business from their dining table, a scrappy operation that grew into a respected digital branding agency, Wren and Hartman Creative. From the outside, they were a dream team. Inside the house, fights erupted like thunderstorms. Elias later admitted, Alyssa always had the last word, always. and I let her win because I didn't want to lose her. He meant it, and little did he know one day those words would echo in ways he could never take back. A new city. A new beginning. By 2014, after years of strain, the couple moved from Ohio to Wilmot Cove, South Carolina, hoping a new environment would soften the cracks in their marriage. For a while, it worked. Photos from those years show them smiling on the Sandbar Coast, hiking through Eagle Ridge National Park, and swimming with their dog in lazy summer evenings. Elias stepped into a lucrative creative director role at Pinnacle Strategies, a marketing firm with clients in higher education. Alyssa took a communications job at a manufacturing plant, stable, steady, and a little dull for a woman like her. But she embraced it. She believed the calm would save their marriage. For 6 years it seemed to. But in 2020, everything changed. Alyssa was suddenly let go from her job. Her job search stretched on for months. Rejections piled up. Her self-esteem cracked. And Elias, without meaning to, began drifting emotionally, looking for validation somewhere else. Somewhere, or rather someone. When Elias saw a job posting at Delaware Coastal University, he didn't hesitate. It was perfect. A creative director position under one of the most dynamic rising stars in university media, Savannah Cole. She was 34, brilliant, polished, driven, charismatic, a former journalist and political communication strategist. She had just run a successful digital transformation for the university and had the confidence of someone who had already lived 3 different lives. Savannah was also unhappily married. Her relationship to those who knew her was described as 2 people living parallel lives. When Elias moved alone to Redwood Harbor, Delaware, for the job, something dangerous began brewing. The first 40 days were quiet, lonely, routine. Then Savannah invited him out for a drink. That glass of bourbon would change everything. Their first conversation was harmless. Their second, intimate. Their third, confessional. Savannah was warm in all the ways Alyssa had grown cold. She admired Elias's ideas. She valued his creativity. She listened. And Elias, starved for affection, fell quickly. He would later confess, "I didn't mean to love her, but it felt like someone finally saw me again." Before Alyssa even moved to Delaware 2 months later, Elias and Savannah had already whispered the words, "I love you." That single choice set the stage for everything that followed. When Alyssa finally joined Elias in Delaware, she walked into a fractured marriage she didn't understand yet. But she felt it immediately. The distance, the guilt, the emotional vacancy. Within 2 weeks, she confronted him. "Who is she?" "It's your boss, isn't it?" "Savannah." Elias denied it, then denied it again. But Alyssa knew him too well. Her intuition was more precise than any lie he could come up with. And so began the most dangerous chapter of their lives. When Alyssa Hartman felt something slip between her fingers, she didn't panic. She planned. Quietly, methodically, obsessively. She had always loved fiercely, sometimes too fiercely. And now, with her marriage dissolving one lie at a time, she became determined to uncover the truth by any means necessary. While Elias believed his denials had calmed her suspicions, Alyssa had already begun building an invisible web around him. She started with the small things, checking his phone when he showered, monitoring his tone when he said Savannah's name, following him on social media under a fake profile. But soon, small wasn't enough. Her fear morphed into fixation, her fixation into obsession, her obsession into something darker. One night in February, Elias was asleep on the couch. Alyssa crept downstairs, barefoot, holding his phone. She gently lifted his thumb and pressed it to the reader. A soft vibration. Unlocked. And that was the moment she saw everything. Photos, messages, midnight conversations written in a language lovers invent for each other. Screenshots he thought he'd deleted. Phone logs with Savannah's number starred and highlighted. Alyssa later wrote in a journal, "It wasn't just betrayal. It was the feeling that my life had been stolen while I was still living it. But the most dangerous part wasn't what she found. It was what she decided to do next. She hired a private digital forensics company. She bought software meant for corporate espionage. She learned how to clone his phone to her laptop. Every text message Elias sent to Savannah, every photo, every whispered, 'I miss you,' every plan, Alyssa saw in real time. A pipeline of heartbreak streamed across her screen for weeks, and each message tightened the coil inside her chest. By March, Elias sensed something was off. Alyssa acted calm, too calm. She cooked dinner. She watered her plants. She smiled at him with an expression that didn't reach her eyes. But she was always watching, always listening, always waiting for something. One afternoon, as Elias prepared to leave for his second marriage counseling session, he slid on his winter coat and froze. A lump, a small rectangular bulge in the lining. His stomach went cold. He grabbed scissors, cut the seam, and something tiny and metallic fell into his palm. A recording device, active, flashing. He dropped it as if it were on fire. When he confronted Alyssa, her expression was nearly serene. "I wanted to know what you two planned." Her voice was calm, eerily calm. He realized then that the woman he had known for half his life was unraveling. Thread by thread, their marriage was no longer cracking. It was collapsing into an abyss neither of them understood. The discovery of the secret accounts. After the confrontation, Elias started searching. He needed answers desperately. That night, he found a bank statement in the mail. The name wasn't familiar. Alyssa R. Hartman. Second account. His nerves prickled. A hidden account. He dug deeper. Inside Alyssa's office drawer, beneath scarves and old receipts, he found a lockpicking kit, software disks labeled Keylogger Pro, a handheld GPS tracker, a strange plastic pouch labeled Surface DNA Test Swabs, a small, new handgun box. Empty, his heart hammered in his chest. He pulled out her laptop and saw folders of audio files, hundreds of hours of recordings. His voice, Savannah's voice on speakerphone. His private thoughts whispered in the car. Conversations in the hallway. Conversations in his sleep. Every moment of his life. Captured, cataloged, transcribed into spiral notebooks, each marked by date. There were 12 of them. Savannah's rising star. While Alyssa spiraled in Delaware, Savannah's world was moving upward. She had just been offered a prestigious communications leadership position at Ravenswood University outside Philadelphia. She rented a home in Winford Glen, a wealthy suburb with ivy-draped brick homes, trimmed hedges, and quiet, winding streets. Alyssa found the address through one of Elias's emails. It ignited something inside her, something primal and dangerous. She began looking at houses on Google Maps. She saved screenshots. She mapped out Savannah's commute. To Alyssa, Savannah wasn't a person anymore. She was a target. She wrote in her journal, "If she's not in his life, everything can go back to the way it was." But something else had changed inside her, something that no one around her saw. Alyssa didn't just want to end the affair. She wanted to end the woman, and the thought didn't scare her anymore. Alyssa crafted a plan no one suspected. On April 23rd, 2021, the night everything would end, she and Elias were supposed to meet for dinner to discuss divorce arrangements. Elias thought they were finally moving toward a civil ending, a peaceful resolution. But while he waited, Alyssa sent 3 texts. "You ruined everything. You deserve the pain you gave me. Goodbye, Elias." Elias didn't realize it then, but she had already disappeared hours earlier, and she wasn't going to dinner. She was going to Winford Glen. At 3:05 p.m., surveillance cameras captured a woman in a dark wig, sunglasses, and a scarf stepping off a train in Radnor Township. She walked calmly, her shoulders straight, her steps steady. She rented a black Chevy sedan 11 days earlier. Inside the trunk were a box of ammunition, latex gloves, a pair of binoculars, a map of Winford Glen with routes highlighted, earplugs, a wipe container. Alyssa had transformed from a betrayed wife into something else entirely. A predator with a cause. A ghost, moving through the suburbs unnoticed. She reached Savannah's house at 5:42 p.m. She watched from a distance, waiting. The day had shifted into golden light as the sun sank between the trees. Inside that house, everything Alyssa feared and everything she envied stood behind a locked door, and Alyssa had come prepared to open it. At 7 to 12 p.m., Savannah arrived home from work. She carried a tote bag on her shoulder, keys jingling in her hand. Alyssa waited in the shadows of Savannah's kitchen, behind the island counter, holding the gun she purchased 5 weeks earlier. Savannah entered humming to herself, completely unaware of the danger. And then, 2 shots, 2 collapses, 2 futures erased. Alyssa didn't hesitate. Police would later say she fired once at Savannah, and once at herself. By 7:46 p.m., both women were dead. The house fell silent. The sun went down, and the man who set all of this in motion was already driving toward the crime scene, unaware his life was about to shatter. The drive toward disaster. Elias Wren was still waiting at the restaurant when Savannah stopped replying to his texts. At first, he didn't panic. She was often absorbed in work. She often forgot to respond. But tonight felt different. Something in his chest tightened, an instinct he couldn't explain. By 7:20 p.m., he decided to drive to her house. He remembered the last words Alyssa had texted him. "Goodbye, Elias." He didn't know whether to interpret it as anger, despair, or something far worse. As he pulled out of the parking lot, a thought pierced him with sudden clarity. What if Alyssa had gone to Savannah's house? He accelerated. Trees blurred past. The wind roared through the cracked window. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. His heart beat so hard he thought it would burst. Winford Glen at sunset looked deceptively peaceful. Lampposts glowed softly. Hedges cast long shadows. Children's bicycles leaned against pristine garages. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Until that night, Elias parked crookedly in Savannah's driveway. The lights inside her house were on. He expected to find Savannah and Alyssa shouting, something he could break up, something he could fix. But the air was too still, too quiet. He knocked. No answer. He pushed the door open, and that moment would scar him for the rest of his life. The bodies. What he saw first wasn't the bodies. It was the blood. A dark, widening pool on the white marble kitchen floor, still glistening, still warm. Then he saw Savannah, face down, hair fanned across the tile, legs twisted unnaturally. And next to her, Alyssa, her wig crooked, her head tilted to the side. The gun, her gun, lying beneath her hand. Elias froze. His breath vanished. His vision blurred. His knees buckled beneath him. He stumbled forward, hands shaking uncontrollably. whispering, "No, no, 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 Alyssa. Savannah, please." He collapsed over Alyssa's body, his forehead pressed to her shoulder. "Baby, what did you do?" His voice shattered mid-sentence. The horrifying reality swallowed him whole. 2 women, both of whom he loved, gone, and every choice he made had led them here. The neighbor who called 911, a neighbor, Thomas Mulvey, had stepped outside when he saw Elias's car screech into the driveway. He approached the open door cautiously. What he witnessed inside made him stagger backward. Elias screaming, the bodies on the floor, blood splattered across the cabinets. Thomas grabbed his phone. The 911 operator would later say his voice was trembling so violently she could barely understand him. There's been a shooting. 2 women. They're dead. Send police, please, please. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the neighborhood. Red and blue lights flashed against windows, illuminating the quiet suburb like a crime scene spotlight. The nightmare had begun. The police arrive. Officers entered the home with guns drawn. Elias was kneeling beside Alyssa, sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. They pulled him away from the bodies and cuffed him immediately. Not because they knew he was guilty, but because the scene demanded it. Blood was everywhere. A gun was under Alyssa's body, and Elias was the only living person in the house. He kept repeating the same sentence. They were already shot. They were already shot. His voice was cracking, hollow, distant, as if his soul had separated from his body. The ambulance ride. Police placed Elias in the back of an ambulance because he was hyperventilating so severely they feared he'd pass out. Inside, the EMT tried to calm him, asking simple questions. Name, address, date of birth. Elias couldn't answer. His mind was somewhere else, still kneeling on that kitchen floor, still trying to shake Alyssa awake, still trying to understand why she did it. The EMT later described him as a man crushed under the weight of something he caused but didn't intend. When Elias reached the station, detectives separated his clothes, bagged his hands for gunshot residue testing, and moved him into an interrogation room. A camera blinked silently in the corner. Detective Rowan entered with a file. He didn't ease into the conversation. He opened with, "Did you shoot these 2 women?" Elias flinched as if struck. "No, I swear. They were shot when I got there." Rowan pressed him. "Why were you there? Why did you go to the house? What were you fighting about? How long were you cheating? Did your wife know? Did she confront you?" Piece by piece, Elias unraveled. He told them about the affair. He told them about the dinner he was supposed to have with Alyssa. He told them about the final texts she sent. He told them about the wig, the surveillance equipment, the breakup, the guilt, and finally, he told them what he saw when he opened the door. Detectives exchanged glances. Something about his story was too detailed, too emotional, too chaotic to be staged. Yet something else was clear. Alyssa had planned this for weeks. The crime scene findings. While detectives questioned Elias, police combed through Savannah's home. They found the black wig, latex gloves on the counter, a bullet lodged in the kitchen cabinet, a broken latch on the back door, glass swept neatly into a dustpan, the rental car outside containing binoculars, ammo, and a map, a handwritten letter in Alyssa's bag. They realized something chilling. Alyssa didn't break in a rage. She broke in with precision. She cleaned up the shattered glass to hide evidence of forced entry. She chose a corner in the kitchen where she wouldn't be seen until the moment she stepped out. This wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated, executed like a military operation. The letter. When investigators opened Alyssa's letter, They found 15 pages of fragmented thoughts, rage, loneliness, and cold determination. She wrote, "If I can't have the life I built, no one will. She took my husband. I'll take everything from her. Tell Elias he should have chosen me." Toward the end, her words grew darker. "If he walks in, I'll kill him too." The detectives realized just how close Elias came to dying that night. By minutes, maybe even seconds, the moment Elias was cleared. After hours of intense questioning, forensics returned with initial findings. No gunshot residue on Elias's hands. No blood spatter on his clothes, except from kneeling over the bodies. The angle of the bullet wounds matched someone of Alyssa's height. The entry point on the back door was consistent with a lone intruder. The gun was under Alyssa's body, and her fingerprints were everywhere. Detective Rowan stepped back into the interrogation room and finally said, "You're not under arrest." Elias collapsed into the chair, face buried in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. His world was still ruined, but at least he wasn't going to prison for a crime he didn't commit. The public reaction, the double death, sent shockwaves through Riverstone Hill, Winford Glen, and Delaware Coastal University. The media called it the affair killing, the Winford double death, the wife's revenge, murder-suicide. Savannah's colleagues mourned her as a rising star. Alyssa's family mourned a woman they believed was pushed to madness. Elias became the man at the center of a tragedy that destroyed 3 lives. He left the region a year later, moved to California, started over, but he carried the ghosts with him everywhere. The day after the tragedy, morning light fell across Meadowlark Drive in long, pale streaks. It touched the police tape. It glowed along the driveway where Elias had parked in panic the night before. It illuminated the windows where 2 women had taken their final breaths. News vans arrived before sunrise. Local stations began broadcasting live. 2 women dead in apparent murder-suicide in Winford Glen. Victims identified as communications executive Savannah Cole and Alyssa Hartman. To the outside world, it was a headline. To those who lived inside the story, it was an earthquake. Savannah's colleagues at Ravenswood University broke down in tears when they heard the news. Professors hugged students in hallways. The cheer squad held a vigil on the football field. Alyssa's family, upon learning she was not a victim, but the shooter, reacted with disbelief, then grief, then anger, then grief again. No one knew which emotions were appropriate. No one had guidebooks for tragedies like this. For the first 48 hours after the deaths, Elias couldn't speak, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He sat curled on his sister's couch with a blanket wrapped around him, staring at the wall, as if the answers were hidden in the paint. His sister Marlene tried to coax him into drinking water. He whispered, "I killed them." She knelt beside him. "Elias, you didn't." Alyssa made choices, terrible ones, but Elias only shook his head. "I broke her. I broke Savannah. If I hadn't, they'd both be alive." Everything he had ever believed about himself, his sense of goodness, responsibility, control, was ripped away. All that remained was guilt. Crushing, relentless guilt. Alyssa's inner world revealed. 2 weeks later, Alyssa's 15-page letter was released to behavioral specialists. It stunned everyone. She described her lifelong fear of abandonment, her deep dependence on Elias for identity, her spiraling panic after losing her job, her obsession with being second best, her belief that Elias's affair meant she had no worth, her growing certainty that killing Savannah would restore her place. The letter shifted from articulate reflections to scattered, frantic scribbling. At one point she wrote, "He is my only anchor. If he drifts, I drown. If he leaves, I die. He cannot leave me. But the darkest lines were toward the final page. If he walks in, I cannot let him ruin the ending. He will join her if he sees this. Psychiatrists called her state, a catastrophic collapse of identity tied to borderline personality disorder. To the public, she became both villain and victim. To Elias, she remained the woman he once loved, and the woman who destroyed his life. At the same time, Savannah Cole's community responded with heartbreak and anger. Her family issued a statement. Savannah was a visionary, a mentor, and a light that filled every room. The world is colder without her brilliance. Former students wrote tributes. Her colleagues at the university held a memorial in the media center she helped build. They placed her favorite camera on a pedestal with a single white rose taped to the lens. One coworker tearfully said, "She dreamed of changing higher education. She didn't get the chance. Her story should have ended in success, not in violence." The university created a scholarship in her name. Yet beneath the tributes, unanswered questions festered. Why hadn't anyone seen the danger Alyssa posed? Why hadn't anyone intervened? Could Savannah have been saved? Those questions would haunt the campus for years. The report from behavioral specialists. Months after the tragedy, Dr. Dalton, a forensic psychologist consulted by investigators, summarized Alyssa's mental collapse in one chilling sentence. She didn't see herself as killing a person. She saw herself as removing a threat to her universe. Dr. Dalton explained Alyssa's distorted worldview. Her marriage was her identity. Losing Elias felt like a literal death. Surveillance gave her a sense of control she mistook for clarity. Listening to hours of Elias's private conversations fed a cycle of rage and despair. Her obsession telescoped until Savannah became the singular cause of all pain. When she bought the gun, Dalton said, Alyssa didn't purchase a weapon. She purchased what she believed was a solution. Her ability to disguise herself, to stalk Savannah's home for days, to hide evidence of the break-in, and to maintain a calm facade, all pointed to a mind operating under delusional but highly organized logic. Dalton concluded she was dangerous long before she pulled the trigger. A month later, Elias attended Savannah's memorial. He sat in the back row, head down, hands intertwined so tightly his knuckles went white. He didn't speak. He didn't approach Savannah's family. He didn't accept condolences. He stood on the fringes of the gathering like a ghost. After the service, Savannah's mother approached him. He expected anger, accusations, hatred. Instead, she took his hand gently. You loved her. I could see that. But love without truth becomes poison. My daughter paid for that poison. He sobbed into her shoulder. It was the first human contact he had allowed since the tragedy. By the end of the summer, Elias could no longer stay in a place where every corner reminded him of Savannah's smile or Alyssa's rage. He packed 2 suitcases and moved across the country to San Solara, California, a quiet coastal town with a horizon that never asked questions. He rented a small, sparsely furnished apartment facing the ocean. He found a job with a branding consultancy in Los Angeles. He spent mornings watching waves crash into the shore, letting the sound wash over him like a baptism he didn't deserve. He wrote, quietly, at night, trying to put into words the fragments of a life shattered by love, lies, obsession, and tragedy. Every day he walked the same beach barefoot, staring at the water. He said it helped him feel small enough to disappear. The book that reopened wounds. 2 years later, Elias released a book titled The Breaking Point: 3 Lives, 2 Deaths, 1 Mistake. He didn't write it to profit. He wrote it to survive. The book chronicled His early marriage, Alyssa's gradual unraveling, his affair with Savannah, the surveillance, the double death, the aftermath, his guilt. Readers described it as raw, devastating, and heart-ripping. Savannah's family refused to read it. Alyssa's family, torn between grief and fury, said he was trying to justify what happened. But Elias insisted, there is no justification, only consequences. He decided he would spend the rest of his life honoring the victims, not by running from the past, but by acknowledging what he had destroyed. Lessons from a love torn apart. The case became a cautionary tale among psychologists, professors, marriage counselors, and criminologists. How emotional dependency can morph into violence. How surveillance technology can enable obsession. How affairs can ignite catastrophic psychological fractures. How signs of mental collapse often go unnoticed until too late. Dr. Dalton, the forensic psychologist, summarized it like this. The tragedy began long before the gunshot. It began the moment love became possession. Closing reflections, the house on Meadowlark Drive. Years later, the house where Savannah and Alyssa died still stands. No plaque marks the site. No memorial sits on the lawn. Families moved in, moved out. Children rode bikes past the mailbox. Lawns were cut. Holidays were celebrated. But the walls remember. The kitchen tiles remember. The air inside remembers. Every tragedy leaves a residue. Something you can't clean with bleach or paint over with new colors. Elias remembers too. On his last visit to Pennsylvania, he walked past the house quietly. He didn't stop. He didn't look inside. He didn't linger. He just whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And then he kept walking into the fading light. Years after the tragedy, Savannah's former home still carried a silence that felt unnatural. New families had lived there. New paint covered the walls. Furniture had come and gone. Laughter had filled the rooms where screams once died in an instant. But certain houses remember. If you stood in the kitchen on a quiet night, the air carried a faint heaviness, an echo lingering in the marble, invisible but present. A realtor once said she felt a coldness without temperature. A contractor noted that the kitchen lights flickered every time he worked on the wiring. Neighbors swore they sometimes heard a faint metallic thud at night, like a dropped object. Of course, none of it could be proven, but tragedies leave fingerprints on the world. Some stains never truly wash out. Elias's letter to himself. On the 2-year anniversary of the shootings, Elias woke before dawn and walked barefoot along the beach in San Solara. The sky was still purple. Waves rolled toward the shore like slow breaths. In his pocket was a folded paper he had carried for months. The letter he wrote to himself. Not to Savannah, not to Alyssa, not to the families, but to the man he used to be before everything shattered. He unfolded it with trembling hands and read it aloud in the soft hush of the morning. I was naive. I thought love was a shield, not a weapon. I thought lies protected people instead of destroying them. I thought someone else's pain was less important than my own comfort. I was wrong. Love is responsibility. Pain is cumulative. Choices ripple outward until they become waves that drown everyone. I didn't pull the trigger, but I loaded the moment. I built the storm that ended 3 lives, and I will carry that truth until the ocean forgets my name. He folded the letter and buried it in the sand. The tide slowly pulled the edges apart. The families seek closure. Closure did not come easily for anyone. Savannah's family. Her mother kept Savannah's old camera on a shelf in her living room, pointed toward the window where sunlight passed through in the afternoon. She refused to move it. She said it helped her keep Savannah in the light. Her father, quiet and stoic, rewired the backyard porch light in her honor. He left it on every night. A cousin created a scholarship for young women entering communications. At every award ceremony, Savannah's photo appeared on the screen, bright, smiling, unaware of her fate. Alyssa's family. Alyssa's parents grieved in a different way. They kept her childhood room untouched. They avoided news interviews. They refused to accept the narrative that portrayed their daughter only as the killer. They asked law enforcement whether Alyssa had shown signs of a deeper mental collapse. They wanted someone, anyone, to explain how a woman so full of life turned into someone capable and of such darkness. Her mother, through tears, once said, "I lost my daughter twice, first to fear, then to violence." Winford Glen is the kind of place where people don't forget. Every Halloween, whispering teens dared each other to walk past Meadowlark Drive. Parents exchanged worried glances when they saw the black sedan parked there the night of the tragedy. The rental car Alyssa left behind. Neighbors who lived through the event still spoke of that night in hushed tones. During block parties, "I heard the shots. I saw the man running. I remember when the lights came flashing around the corner. I'll never forget his face, the husband's. He looked dead inside." Some said Alyssa was a monster. Some said she was broken. Some said Savannah should never have been involved. Some said Elias should have left years earlier. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had the full truth. Because the full truth died on that kitchen floor. Elias returns to the scene one last time. 5 years after the tragedy, Elias made one final trip to Pennsylvania. The weather was overcast. Rain clung to his jacket as he walked down Meadowlark Drive. His steps were slow, his breath shaky. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He wasn't looking for answers. He simply wanted to stand outside the house where his past had ended. He reached the sidewalk in front of the home. The hedges were trimmed. A new family lived there. Children's chalk drawings colored the driveway. Life had resumed. As he stared at the front door, memories slammed into him. Savannah laughing the first time she cooked in that kitchen. Alyssa's calm voice saying, "I know everything." The sound of his own scream when he found them. The weight of two lifeless bodies. The metallic smell of blood. The cold kitchen tiles under his knees. All of it crashing like a broken tide. He whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." No one heard him. He didn't need them to. He needed himself to hear it. He turned. He walked away. He didn't look back. The final lesson. A criminologist analyzing the case later said, "This tragedy is not about an affair. It's about fragility. Fragility of trust. Fragility of identity. Fragility of mental health. Fragility of relationships held together by hope rather than truth." A therapist summarized the psychology this way: when love becomes possession, and when fear becomes obsession, the smallest betrayal can ignite the darkest actions. No one wakes up planning to destroy lives, but people break in slow fractures, and sometimes those fractures run deeper than anyone realizes until it's too late. Back in San Solera, Elias continued his morning ritual, walking along the shoreline, barefoot, quiet, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of memory. But something had changed. He stopped carrying guilt like a chain. He carried it like a scar, visible, permanent, but healed enough to move forward. The ocean rolled back and forth, patient and eternal. He stared at it and thought, the sea remembers nothing. The sea forgives nothing. The sea washes everything away. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a fragile breath of peace. Not forgiveness, not closure, just peace. A small, trembling peace that came from accepting the painful truth. He could not undo what happened. He could only live carefully now, with honesty, with humility, with accountability, and hope that the future held something gentler than the past. He turned from the ocean. He walked toward the sunrise, and the tide rolled behind him, erasing the footprints he left in the sand.